In this chapter, we're going to take a look at adding backgrounds and using them to enhance the way our pages look. Background images are one of the most fascinating aspects of CSS design because we can gain so many different beautiful design results from using the background properties. First thing we're going to do is have you move over to your code editor. I'm in Dreamweaver 8, as you can see, mostly because I'm going to be using the snippets feature. But as always, you can use an editor of your choice and follow along with the exercises. And all the files that you need are in Chapter 7. So as you can see, we have a nice simple HTML file here, and we have attached a style sheet that gives us some basic structure to the page so that as we work, we have some styles already there. But we're going to be focusing on adding the background graphics. We've created all of these graphics, and again, all the assets are with the exercise files, so you can build this along with us and experiment on your own as well. And did you have any specific advice for people working with background graphics and maybe some information about when to choose using a background graphic rather than an inline image, which is really what people are most accustomed to doing?
One of the choices that designers have to make when they start working with background images in CSS is to really decide when an element is purely decorative and when it conveys some sort of meaning. So, for example, it could be argued that a portrait of somebody in a biography, for example, would be considered content, and that image would have alternative text attached to it. However, if the image is purely decorative, then it's much more sensible to move that image to the CSS file.
Another thing that's so important, of course, is that we have to bear in mind that background images, as rich as they can make our designs, they are not clickable. In other words, we cannot link them to resources. So a good rule of thumb is that anything that has to be or will possibly be in the future made into a link, that image will probably need to go inline if you intend to link it. In the background, of course, again, these are more your decorative images, the things that are styling the page but aren't necessarily responsible for any interaction.
In some of the movies later on, we're going to deal with how we can attach background images to links with some of the examples.
Yeah, and as you'll see as we go through these steps, that really helps us create these beautiful interactive features with CSS and no JavaScript, in fact. And I think people who haven't had a taste of this are going to be very excited. So the first thing I'm going to do is start styling with the HTML element. And this is a bit interesting because a lot of people don't realize that they can add style directly to the HTML element. If you'll recall from our earlier discussions, HTML is the root element. And essentially, if we apply a style to that, the entire visual space will have that style. In this case, we've given the background color, and we've provided a reference to the html.png that's going to go in the HTML background, and we're going to repeat it along the x-axis. We'll talk about background repeat in the next movie. So let's give this a save and see where it brings us. Go ahead and preview in Firefox. And as you can see, we have some basic page structure here. And we have the image attached seemingly to the back of the HTML. And as you can see here, the left and right columns are not picking that up because it is on the HTML only. And we will go ahead and continue to style these as we go along. So next, let's try to add some style to the body. And here again, we have a background. The color that we have for the background is going to be the HTML default. We haven't included a color here, but what we have done is include a different image. So let's see what happens as we build up the background images. Go ahead and preview in our browser. And as you can see, we not only now have the visual image from the background image originally from the HTML, but now we also have the body styled with an image that's running along the top there.
One of the interesting things about this example is how we've used alpha transparency in PNG images, which is going to be much more widely supported in browsers with the advent of Internet Explorer 7.
Yes, a very exciting time for graphic designers because I think this technique becomes so rich.
If you look at the image files in the source folder, you'll see that the two images that we've used so far for HTML and for body are graduated grey images, which allow a certain percentage of the background colour to show through. And that gives us tremendous flexibility when we want to style different templates, for example, within a site. So simply now by changing the background colour on the HTML, we can get a whole range of different colour layouts, all using the same images.
And all kinds of interesting effects, sort of, if you imagine a stack of transparent tape where maybe you have a design on it and then you lay another piece with a different design over that tape and build almost like a layered cake of images so that you get all kinds of areas where you're seeing through the images to other images below it, colors below it, things of that nature. And this gives us so many rich options we never had before in web design.
A lot of the examples that we're going to be using in these movies do involve transparent PNGs.
So let's go ahead and let's add a background image to the branding area here. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in. And as you can see now, we've added an additional image to the branding section. And you're seeing some repeat values go on here. And I'm going to go into those again in the next movie. So let's save the file and take a look at it in our browser. And as you can see, we are now beginning to build this sort of layer cake that I'm sort of talking about, but with the alpha transparency, being able to see through it and creating this very rich environment. Back to Dreamweaver. And now we can add content main code here. And now the content main, which is the right column in this case, is going to get a different background. So let's save the file and preview it in Firefox. And now we see the image here. Okay, and as you can see, the design is really beginning to take shape, but we haven't added really anything except images into the background elements, leaving these areas completely available to further style, to add more content, anything we want. Back to Dreamweaver. I'm using Expose to switch between my many windows here. And let's go ahead into the content sub column, which is the left column. And let me drop that in there and move it down. Give it a save. Go ahead and view in Firefox. And now we see the left column is styled as well. Back to Dreamweaver. Let me give us a little breathing space. And the next one we want to add is the site info.
This is where we'd commonly add copyright statements or terms and conditions, the usual legalese that clients...
Footer style
the
information.
footer style, yeah.
Accessibility, compliance, anything like that. So let's give this a save into our site info area and see how that now looks when we load it up in Firefox. And as you can see now, each of these divisions has taken on a different image, and where the alpha transparency is in play is allowing us to see through that transparent part into the layer below it. Layer is a bit of a dangerous word to use because obviously for those of you who've worked in Photoshop and Illustrator, layers mean different things in different applications. But it does make sense to describe it that way because it's essentially what we're doing, layering or stacking these images in a sense in the background. So also to reiterate a couple of interesting things is that we styled the HTML element and we styled the body before even getting into styling the divisions within the page.
What's fascinating here really is how with just 6 very, very small images in terms of file size, we're able to create a really interesting layout.
I agree, and I think it begins to force a little challenge on designers. They have to begin thinking in a different way. When we were working with table-based layouts, it was very, very different. All the images were in the document. They were sliced up into tables and
spacer
GIFs. And now this is a very different way of thinking. So I highly encourage you not only to build this exercise along with us, but begin to play with your own images and creating your own images and dropping them into backgrounds and layering, trying to achieve this layered effect and using the alpha transparency PNG to really enhance the work that you're doing.